This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode in our series of the hard facts about soft skills for HR professionals. I hate to use this word that's been used so much, but I know these are unprecedented times. And the amount of registrants for this particular webinar to me was astounding and spoke to the fact that a lot of people are interested in this topic and hearing Donald speak about this topic. We have a lot of HR professionals because that's our target audience, but there are a lot of recruiters here today, and there are those who are looking for jobs. There are many people out there who are looking, so they want to get some of the tips. So I was excited to see people registering every place all around the United States, and even some from South America and several from Europe. So it's exciting to have all of you here. And we're all going through challenging times, but we want to share information so we're better equipped to deal with some of the challenges we're dealing with right now in the workplace. And we'll be getting into that in a moment after I introduce Donald. Before we talk about, get started, I just want to go through a little bit about the format of this for those of you who have not attended before. We will have 45 minutes of content. The actual webinar will be over at 12:45 Eastern time. But we will be available for the next 15 minutes after that to answer any questions. We welcome questions throughout the webinar. We're not going to be opening up mics, but what I'd like you to do is just post in the chat box and we'll respond to your questions. If necessary, we can always open up the mic. But just post your questions throughout. We will have that hard stop at 1 o'clock, and then at the end, we will have a survey. So we're hoping that you'll be able to complete that. So I'd like to, and again, let's everybody close their cameras. Thank you. First, I'd like to introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Linda Katz-Wilner, and I'm the CEO of a company, Successfully Speaking, and I help people in all aspects of their career improve their communication skills and polish their professional presence. Everything from speaking to listening to foreign accent modification and whatever else they may need to be a confident speaker. And I've had these series for the past 2 years, and I've interviewed wonderful experts who have shared their expertise as it relates to some of the soft skills we need when we're looking for jobs, when we're operating in our own profession, and even in a social situation. So I was excited to meet Donald Coleman and talk about what we can offer as part of the hard facts about soft skills. And little did we know how the world would change from the time we arranged this. So first, I want to just thank you, Donald, for coming here, and maybe if you can just tell us who you are and what you do.
It's a pleasure. So I am one of the partners at Who's Staffing. We are a staffing and recruiting company located in Baltimore. We service mainly technical, sales, and operations lines of business. But I've been in recruiting most of my adult life. I've spent time in most of my career before I got at Who's Staffing in the accounting and finance space. So, interviewing candidates, working with customers, trying to identify talent is basically what I've been doing for 20 odd years.
Great. And when we talked about this originally, we were talking about the candidate, as we titled it, the candidate interview experience. And One of the things we talked about 2 months ago, I think, Donald, was that it's a candidate-driven process. What has changed?
Well, I mean, it has been a 180. So when we originally started designing this, and I mean, it's shocking to think that's only 6 or 7 weeks ago. It feels like 3 lifetimes ago. But we were at a point where it was probably as candidate a driven market as I've worked in, and I've been doing this, as I said earlier, for quite a while. So, and what that really meant was almost every single candidate that we were working with had options. If they were interviewing one place and somebody liked them, you could guarantee 2 or 3 other companies also liked them as well. So it was constantly competing offers. And so, we were very passionate about trying to make sure our customers understood that when you are interviewing now, you have to be selling, right? That's really what it came down to. You have to be designing an interview process that not just screens the candidate for the skills that you need for them to be qualified for the job, but why should they choose you? That became just as important, right? If you like them, how do you secure them? Really is what it came down to. And so that's kind of what this was designed to really dive into. And then here we are today, and unemployment's at Great Recession. I mean, the Great Depression levels, and 22 million people unemployed, and certainly that's changed a little bit. And now people are much more focused on the ones that are actually hiring. How do we do that? And I don't think the hiring has been as tricky as how do we onboard. Those have been challenges to customers that we've had that still need people, but how do we make that happen in this new world with social distancing and everything else? So, I mean, yeah, how has it changed? I mean, it's really done kind of a 180, and it felt, I know you and I had talked, it felt a little almost insensitive to continue to just drive this whole conversation around the candidate experience when the experiences for everybody have changed so significantly.
And you said, because everything is virtual now, right? Everything has changed. How should we, you spoke about onboarding, and let's wait to get to that.
Yeah.
And let's talk first about the whole interview process. So how should we adapt, both as HR professionals, recruiters, and the people looking for jobs? How should we adapt to the virtual world of interviewing?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's kind of learning as they go along, right? I mean, and some companies have been better equipped than others. I mean, we work with some customers, and there are probably people out there that work at companies where, virtual interviews were already maybe part of the process because they have virtual hiring managers. And so that's not a big deal, and it's not a big change. But then we have other customers that have never done anything like this ever and are still, the idea of, well, how am I going to hire somebody if I haven't met them is very difficult for them to kind of get their head around.
Mm-hmm.
And so the adaptation levels have differed depending on the company and kind of where they were coming at this from. Us as an organization, we're an in the office organization for the most part. I mean, we're out and about, but we come in pretty much every day. And now it's been an adjustment for us.
Mm-hmm.
So really having to design a process for some HR, if the HR folks that are in charge of that, can be difficult depending on what your hiring manager's adaptability is. But the reality is, if you are going to hire people right now, you need to figure out ways like this to interview. Most processes, I feel like, had a phone interview at some point. Usually the first step was we see, if I could say, the lion's share that we do is the first step is a phone call, and it's basically like, before we all invest a bunch of time, let's just make sure in 30 or 45 minutes that we're all on the same page. So that probably hasn't had to change much, but it's the step from there that if you still are hiring, and that's fantastic if you are, because a lot of places aren't, you'll need to figure out ways to create these virtual interviews.
And Donald, you made me think about this. You said the phone interview is the first step, and that's often the case with most jobs. But now people are starting to be more comfortable with Zoom. I mean, today we use GoToMeeting, but Zoom. And so I find, even for the work I do, people who used to call for a 15-minute free consultation are now opting to do it as a Zoom call.
Yeah.
So even that 15-minute call gives us a different sense of who our potential client or potential employee might be just by seeing them. Do you think that will change your practice?
I don't know. I mean, I would agree with you, and I think some of it is the times. I think people right now are so kind of yearning for some connection that if you can see them rather than just be a disembodied voice on the phone, you'll opt for that. I don't know. I mean, I certainly think there's going to be some things that come out the other side of this that will become the new normal. I don't know that will, only because I think we're humans, and we'll get back to, hey, we're seeing everybody, things have gotten back to normal, and a phone interview's fine kind of thing. Whereas I do agree with you right now, there is a desire, I think, to see people when you talk to them, for a lot of folks, if you can, just because you're not seeing a whole lot of people at home. You're seeing the same folks.
And that's part of it, but because I focus so much on the 3 V's of communicating, the visual, the vocal, and verbal, the phone calls just give us an opportunity to evaluate somebody better. And so I think on both parts, on the recruiter or the HR professional and the candidate, they need to think about how they're coming across from day one, which could have been a phone call, but perhaps they can use some of the nonverbal communication to their advantage if they know how to use the technology. And so that brings us down another path. And it made me think, I hadn't thought about it until just now, but I'll send out the link to everybody who's in attendance that I have a video on what are some of the tips, a video and a LinkedIn post on what you should be doing for those interviews. Because if you're an HR professional or recruiter and you're interviewing somebody from home right now, what if you're in your bedroom? What if your kids are running around? How is that representing your organization? So, because I focus so much on soft skills, these are going to be some big issues that we have to start paying more attention to.
And I will say we've had some comments around that. I think what I'm finding is, at least right now, people are being very empathetic and understanding to the fact that, hey, I'm at home because I have to be, and I'm not necessarily set up. And I mean, I have 2 dogs, and I cannot guarantee that at some point during this 45 minutes, they're not going to see a deer and start barking. You know, I mean, I think so for the most part, people are trying the best that they can, but they are, I find on both sides, there is some empathy to the fact that, hey, I get that we're all figuring this out, kind of thing.
The classic was that I thought I've heard everything because I heard about the dogs, the children, the spouses. But the other day, one of my clients had one of her robot cleaners come into the room and start whirring, and that was a first for that. So
that is a new one.
We have to be sensitive to that, but we also should be mindful of how are we dressed, at least from the waist up for that interview, or even the person who's doing the interview, because you're representing your company too. So it's something to
100%. I mean, yes, you should be thinking about that.
Right. Now, you mentioned onboarding. So you have a candidate, you decided to hire him, or maybe you decided a month ago to hire him or her. What are some of the things to think about with onboarding now that it has to be done virtually?
Well, yeah, so we've seen it, it's happened a couple of times. We had people that were hired and they pushed their start date back while they figured that out. And now we have people that are engaged in active interviewing process now, obviously have a plan for that, right? So it is, there's not that many options really, right? So we've had a couple of things happen. One is, we do a lot of technology work. So there's a need to have a laptop. And a lot of times it's company issued laptop. So one of the new processes is they're shipping a laptop to someone's home. We had a customer actually kind of meet in the parking lot. The candidate, they met in the parking lot and kind of exchanged, with masks on, exchanged a laptop through the window. So, and I believe the one thing I'm not 100% sure on is and I don't even know if there's been any new kind of literature about this, but what are the I-9 rules, right? Because that's the other thing is, needing to be able to do that in person. So we've seen, and we hire people as well and put them out on contract. We've been doing that through a FaceTime or through a Zoom or something, or have them send copies of it and watch them sign it. And we're trying to kind of make that work. So I think that's one of the other pieces that's been a challenge is that paperwork piece, the one that used to need to be in person. So.
Right. So Donald, explain to those who don't know what the I-9 is.
Yeah, it's the verification that you're eligible to work, and usually it's either a passport or a social security card and a driver's license. And that was one of the things the government says when that's being completed, somebody needs to witness it. To the point that if a person from your company couldn't do it, you needed a notary kind of thing to be there. It needed a witness. And now that we are all practicing social distancing guidelines, that's something that I think is also being done virtually. Viewing and then attaching and sending.
Right. So you said you don't know if other people know of more recent guidelines. If anybody knows anything about the I-9, what's current, put it in the chat box. And if you have any questions, as Donald and I are talking, please write them down, right in the chat box. We want this to be interactive. We want to get feedback from what you know or what your questions might be, because we have an expert here who can answer some. And then there are some other experts who might know other information, like more current regulations or rules for the I-9s.
And
So,
so I'll finish. One of the other challenges of the onboarding is once you can get through all of the logistics, is kind of what we're talking about now. It's not even so much how do we get them the ability to do their work, but it's been, I think, and will remain a challenge is how do we integrate that person into the company culture? And
mhm,
I know, I'm sure we're all reading a lot of the same LinkedIn posts and seeing a lot of the same, the Zoom and the Teams happy hours and those are, I mean, those are what you need to be doing right now,
mhm.
frankly, because there's no other way to integrate somebody new into an organization unless they get to kind of see the other people. So I think that's been something that's been new, and I wouldn't be surprised if to some degree that's something that remains a more normal thing for remote and scattered workforces, the ones that don't all get back together when this is over. Um, that's been something I think has been a challenge, and that's the way people are meeting that challenge.
So somebody was telling me at her organization, they may have a Monday meeting for the team. And on Fridays, they are doing something where they're all getting pizza in some way
Yeah,
separately, having a pizza party or something. But I can imagine it's a challenge for a new employee who
right,
is getting into a job and they don't know the people, they don't see the people, and they don't shake hands with the people, but yet they're supposed to be part of the team.
right,
So
and that's a challenge.
yeah, type in if anybody in the audience has any good suggestions on ways to integrate new people into the organization. If they've come up with any ideas, please post them and we'll certainly share them. Now, I think you touched on this a little bit, Donald, but during these times, which we have to be so sensitive to what's going on around the world, the whole world around us, is what's that driving value of our organization? Like how are we going to drive value to our organizations when we're looking to hire people to come in?
Yeah, no, I was thinking about that in anticipation of this, and I think that again, that's one of the things that has been such a massive shift. It's almost like a lot of the companies now, the fact that they're hiring is value, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
because so many places just aren't. Um, and there's less competition for the candidates. There's more candidates on the market, and now much less competition for those existing candidates in a lot of fields. In some fields, I think that that's not necessarily the case.
Hmm.
Um, so I think some things never, I think it's always important in an interview process for a company to always keep in mind that it's important for them to uncover what it is that's important to the candidate.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of times that gets forgotten. And I think that's the way companies do drive value through an interview process is to take the time to understand, you know, okay, you have the skills, but what are you looking for? Is it growth? Is it a mentor? Is it, what are the things that are important to you? And then be honest with your organization is, do you offer those things?
Hmm.
Because those are the things outside of money that when we were talking in the very beginning about a candidate driven interview process that became critical. And
Hmm.
I think even though the things have changed, getting into the habit of incorporating that into an interview process, because at some point this market will go back, however long that is, at some point it will, and having that as an inherent part of your interview process is critical.
So do you think, and I don't want to use the term lazy, but maybe lax, do you think that people who are now recruiting or interviewing candidates may not feel it's necessary to drive value because they're in a position of strength right now because people want to work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, and that's where we were almost too far the other way. Candidates knew the leverage and the power that they had,
Mhm.
and it was hard as recruiters to kind of talk them, bring them back to reality a little bit. And that's what happens in shifting markets when it's too far one side or the other. It can tend to when it's a very client driven market, it can impress me kind of thing, and forgetting about the fact that there are going to be, but the reality is right now sometimes it's like, hey, I need a job.
Mhm.
So the clients can get away with that, but is it, that's not going to be a forever thing,
Mhm.
right? And again, the kind of what we were originally scheduled to talk about was, and that's why I say the world has literally done a 180. It's kind of the opposite of where we were literally at the beginning of March, the
Mhm.
exact opposite place.
Right, right.
But yeah, I think it's human nature to get comfortable if you have all the power.
But I guess what you're hearing, and you hear this all over on LinkedIn, it's we can't always drive a lot of business right now, but how we're acting will be remembered. And so
Yes.
even if you're interviewing prospects and boy, it's your choice. You can get anybody because they're so desperate. The ones that are going to stand out are the ones who still show value to their organization, right? Because what we show in difficult times, we do remember when these people do that. So maybe that's something to think about. Maybe we shouldn't be lax. Now,
Yeah.
I have some questions that are coming up, and I just want to see if we make sure we respond to them. Let's see, Phil, my understanding that employees can check the I-9s via photos or video, but once quarantine is lifted, we're expected to go back and check in-person documents. And he's going to see if he can get a link to share with us. So
Thank you for
that. Now, there was another question that the background checks, do we think that the results are coming in much slower with the government facilities being closed? Have you had experience with that, Donald?
I cannot speak to that. We don't do a ton of government work. So the company, when we do background checks and drug screens for the companies that require that, but we have a private company and I don't have enough experience to be able to comment on that. I'm just not sure.
Okay, and if anybody does know about that, please post it so we can see that. And I'm looking here. Okay, get my glasses back on. I see there's a post here. Right, Eric was saying, I hope everyone realizes how unrealistic we've been about almost everything relative to our expectations, and that we should recalibrate how we conduct business and act in and around our community. And it is tough. It's a tough time to try to sell things. It is. To our independent or solopreneurs or the entrepreneurs, we have to be sensitive, but people have to make money too. So it's a very delicate balance on how we come across.
It absolutely is. I mean, and we have a salespeople in our organization, and it's a conversations that I think everyone's having is, if I'm calling to try to tell you about my services, I certainly don't mean to offend. I just, in a lot of cases, we're calling and I don't know your situation and I don't know your circumstances. And there are certainly some people that are still hiring and, hoping that the attitude is, hey, good for you that you still have the ability to make sales calls as opposed to being offended that you're getting that call. And it's tough because it's human nature to, God, right now you're going to cold call me. But the other side of that is, yeah, but right now I have a job and that job is to cold call and I'm grateful to have it. And I'm going to call as many people as I can. So it's, kind of one of those things. It just depends on your perspective, but I certainly would err on the side of, I'd rather have more people out there getting paid to make sales calls. That's probably a good sign. When they dry up altogether, that's probably not great. So,
and I guess it's your messaging on how you approach it.
That's very true.
It's like when it's January of the new year, how long do you write in your emails, Happy New Year?
Yeah.
This is even more sensitive. When do you stop focusing on, I know you're going through challenging times, and I think we do have to be really sensitive to that because there are people who are not only unemployed, but maybe their spouse is also unemployed.
Yeah.
And they can't pay their bills.
Well, any of it, if any of it is done without empathy, then, even as you're making a call, look, I know that this might be the worst time for this. I don't know your situation and here's what I do. And if it is, and you need me to go pound sand, just tell me, it's kind of how you approach it, but there are still people out there that are doing business and a lot of times doing business means receiving calls that you don't want. It just, that's
right. But being sensitive to how you approach it and being 100%. A good listener and reader, that's why I'd say the video should be open. So if I'm picking up that what I'm talking about is distressing you or you're not comfortable with it, just observe people and listen to them and just be there to make a connection, because if you make a good connection now, they'll be there afterwards and hopefully
100%. And this is happening for us on the other side. I don't know that I was anticipating this, but we also talked to a lot of candidates. We talked to a lot of people that are now unemployed, and we were working mainly before. We were almost working exclusively with employed people. But what we're finding is that there's a lot of folks now that are working that are saying, you know what, I'm going to stay put. I am getting paid. It doesn't look like they're going to lay me off. So there's no way that I'm going to entertain another job. So we've had people that were in the middle of interview processes. Well, I wasn't expecting that piece, I guess. I don't know why, but we've seen that happen a few times. So also as recruiters being empathetic to that, like, hey, I get it. If this is the the safe harbor for you right now, then stay where you are, and we can pick this back up when things hopefully improve, whenever that is. And then having to go tell customers, hey, Jane Smith or John Jones is just not, he's pulling himself from the process because he's just going to stay where he is.
Right. And I want to get to that because that's another whole topic. But there's something that I see that Eric posted a link. If everybody wants to look into this, and we'll send it out afterwards. But there's a link to a law firm that talks about the I-9 subject for some information on that. And Jenny Payne did say that background checks are slower, especially in the jurisdictions that require an actual person to pull data from courthouse records. It's great.
Right.
So that's helpful. And Eric said something here, Eric Bathurst, that successful onboarding create clear, concise 30, 60, 90-day goals and day 1, day 2 onboarding schedule and review with the candidate on the first day. Review these goals throughout the 90 days to help ensure successful acclimation into their role and into the organization. And I'm guessing you need to check in more because they're not walking by your office.
Yeah.
So that's something.
Yep.
Thank you for that information. That was helpful, Eric. And empathy. Of course, empathy is important. But that's important anytime. So I think right now, everything's being highlighted. What some of the important soft skill sets are. Now it's being highlighted during these times. That, if you weren't paying attention before, you're still not paying attention, that's a problem. You need to focus on putting your best self forward. Okay. Now, so I wanted to come back to what you were saying. You did say some people were in the middle of the interview process.
Yep.
Maybe in March, and all of a sudden, you said they may choose not to pursue it because they're comfortable where they are. But what do you do with the candidates that you have in the pipeline, the resumes that you have on file? What do you do with all that information?
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, that has happened, but I think it was a much larger majority of what was happening was customers saying, hey, we're pressing pause. And I know we had 3 or 4 people in the process, but we're putting everything on hold. That certainly was more prevalent than the candidates withdrawing, but it had happened on both sides. And I think that's, as for companies that were not using recruiters and, interviewing directly, I think the key, and I don't think that changes any time, is just honest, timely feedback. I can't, it's in our business, the number one thing I think over the years I've heard people hate about recruiters is they never hear back. Send them to a job, you never hear back. That happens from companies as well. I interviewed, had a phone interview, I never heard any. I think the ability to just share honestly where somebody stands, even if I think people would much rather hear bad news than no news. If somebody is no longer going to be considered, or that position's been closed, or this happened, that happened, sharing it and sharing it timely is so appreciated. I've had to obviously tell more people than I could count over the years, hey, that job didn't go your way. But the fact that they heard it, a couple hours after the interview or a day after, and they didn't have to guess and they didn't have to chase me down, probably gotten more, gratitude for that than anything. Just honestly telling them, hey, you're no longer being considered and here's why. So I think that there's this desire a lot of times to just not want to have to share bad news, but candidates they appreciate it much more than not hearing anything. So I think anybody that was in play, if you know that there's an outcome, share it. Just share it with everybody. And again, I think that's one of those things that when things turn around, I guarantee you those candidates will remember who did and who did not do that.
Right. So you still can be laying the groundwork for good relationships, even if you're sometimes giving bad news, because you're at least being honest. And then people that don't have the false expectations that something might come through.
That's it. And in this time, again, it goes back to empathy, right? You want to be honest with people right now. Hope is great, but false hope, I don't know so much. So, and hey, there were a few people was like, the honest truth was, we really liked you. And I think this probably was going to happen, but now that position's on hold. So if and when this comes back, if you're still around, I'd like to consider you. If that's the truth, then that message should be shared.
Sure.
Right. But I wouldn't tell somebody that if that's not the case.
Now, here's a question for you, because you are a company that does recruiting. And I know there are a lot of people here who are HR recruiters working for their organization.
Yep.
Why would companies use recruiters since the market is so flooded now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And look, the reality is there's certain segments um, that they probably won't. I mean, there just won't be a need. Um, I think I'd mentioned in the beginning, I'd spent a lot of time in the accounting and finance space. And in 2009, I considered myself more of a grief counselor than a recruiter. There weren't any jobs for accountants. I mean, it was a back office cost, and there was a lot of really, really good people on the market, and they certainly didn't need recruiters. And it was a really, really tough market. There's times where that happens.
Mhm.
And so there's certain segments where the reality will be there's enough good people that you probably don't need the incremental cost of having a recruiter find them for you. But a couple of instances that will, if you're hiring contract people and you want to have that person be somebody else's employee, which I think is a whole nother topic, but one of the things that will be very interesting to see coming out of this, whenever that is, how many companies prefer contract labor because it's so much easier to ramp up and ramp down as opposed to having full-time employees, and you see all the furloughing and all the things that are going on. So it will be interesting to see. So we're using recruiters that have the ability to hire contractors, put them on their payroll, and have them work on, well, not on your job site, but remotely on your work would be a
Mhm.
reason why you would want to be able to use recruiters. And then there are still segments. I mean, I would still say in some segments of the information technology space, software developers right now is as hard as it's ever been to find a good software developer. And the companies that we work with are still willing to pay a fee if we can find them somebody because they are not finding it on their own. So
Mhm.
I think it will depend. The user recruiter, if it's you need a contract employee that you want on somebody else's payroll, or there are skill sets out there, sales as well. Really good salespeople are almost always working. So most companies, if it's a revenue generating position,
Mhm.
open to paying a fee for somebody that's going to come in and drive revenue. So um, I think so. It will depend on those two things, right? Is it a contract that you don't want on your payroll, and is it in a demand area that is still um, isn't seeing the level of unemployment that other areas are? I think
Mhm.
those would be the two instances where recruiting services will bring the same value they always have.
Okay. Like you said, so some of it's job specific, whereas there may be ways that this company may say, we can pick our candidates. We're not having trouble. Everybody's looking for jobs. So
Absolutely.
I guess it's going to be a constantly changing, and we keep adapting as times change because we don't know when we're coming out of it and what it will be like and what the climate will be for hiring. Now, are there any questions coming from the attendees? Does anybody have any questions that here we have Donald right here to answer them as far as the recruiting? Feel free to post them if you do have any questions. And as we're doing that, I know, Donald, you did say that one thing you'll make available to the attendees would be what you help your candidates with, and that's questions that they should ask an interviewer. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and it's one of the things. Again, I think it's when we talk about driving value in an interview process is, it's really an interview is unique because both sides are buyers and sellers at the same time, right? And so we kind of have a conversation with all our candidates that are going to interview and some of our customers about how to make sure that you are really as somebody that's selling yourself. You're selling yourself in an interview. How do you do that? How do you make sure that things that you're talking about are things that matter to you? If I'm interviewing with you, Linda, how do I know, make sure that tell me about yourself. And I spend 25 minutes talking about something that you could care less about, right? I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about how to question and how to uncover the information that's critical to you for the
Mhm.
role that you're hiring for.
Mhm.
And those questions are designed to do that, and they really work both ways. The questions goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning about companies uncovering what's important to candidates. It works both ways, right? So um, think obviously, what are the questions we have everybody ask is, what are the top 2 or 3 technical skills someone's going to need to possess to be successful, rather than a job description, and we all written them, seen them, it'll have 15 things. Well, all 15 aren't going to be the things that you're making the decision on. There's probably 2 of them, maybe 3, that if they're really good in these areas, that's really what I'm most concerned with. Well, as an interviewer, if I don't know that, then I'm spending time talking about things that aren't really important to you at the end of the day. So I need to be able to find, I need you to tell me, these are the things, all those, there's 15 skills, it's this, that, and this. And then that way I can spend time, if I have experience in those areas and I'm really strong in those areas, I'll spend time talking to you about that. You'll feel like there's value because that's really what you want to hear, right? So it's we prep, we call, prep our candidates to interview, and it's really around that. It's never ever about giving anybody the answers to the test. It's not a script. Interviews are very organic. So it's much more a mindset of, I need to find out from you what's important. And that's what those questions are designed to do.
And shouldn't it always be that way? So what you're saying basically is it's a conversation, it's not an interrogation, right?
100, I've used that, that's funny you say that, I've used that exactly. The light's shining and you're sweating and they're firing questions at you. That's not what this is designed to do. It's really to both sides to uncover information. Is this a fit for both of us? And the only way to do that is to have dialogue.
And I think it's going to be more challenged now because of the need for so many people to get that job. So maybe it will be interesting to see how definite a candidate might be of, this is what I want in a job, because they may be more desperate, they just want to be hired. So it'll be interesting how this all settles out. But like what you're saying is, of course, it should be a conversation, because if I'm applying for a job, I want to know that I'll be happy there. And part of it is I need money, but the other part is, will I be happy in that culture? And that's where we're getting back to how it was, where it was the candidate driven.
Right.
Like, is it the job I want?
Right, but then the company benefits from finding out the truth about that, because now we know it is a long-term fit. You're not going to be back 90 days starting over again. So, being kind of having that open and honest dialogue ultimately helps both sides to make a determination. But yeah, certainly in certain markets, hey, I just need a job. That's a different, that's kind of a different conversation than, what that candidate prep is initially intended. It's, hey, I just need a job. This is much more about helping both sides to evaluate if this job makes sense for both parties.
And Eric made a good point about that, where he said you can lose a year plus in your profits by not interviewing properly, not meeting compliance issues, and maybe hiring the wrong fit for your team. So we have to certainly take that seriously. And even if somebody's desperate, you want to take the right job. And if you're hiring or interviewing, make sure it is the right candidate.
100%.
We've covered so many different things, and I think this is great information for anybody who is going to be interviewing a candidate, or is the candidate who's going to be looking for a job. At this point, I'd like to open up if there are any other questions. If anybody has questions, and if you even want to ask a question, we can open up the mic. Just post in the chat that you have a question that you want to ask. If not, in the meantime, what I'm going to just mention is what we have coming up after this. After this webinar. Next month, we're going to have Kristen Berger coming to talk about how HR professionals need to be very strategic and how that has changed because of the current times. And then in June, we're going to have Bill Huter talking about conversations and difficult conversations you might have at work. And he's also an EOS implementer. So we will be giving that information and sending that information to you. But at this point, are there any other questions that people have? Any, Marty, I'm looking to see if anybody's making any comments or questions. If you have questions afterwards, I know Donald, you'll probably say this, that they can certainly reach out to you.
Absolutely.
Questions. So looking here. Okay, and you'll be providing information with them about the questions that candidates can ask. So if they're the HR recruiters they know what to expect coming from their candidates, even though the times have been challenging. Let's see, if we don't have questions, we can close up at this point. Donald and I will stay here if anything comes up as people leave, but we will stop the recording in a moment. And I want to thank all of you for attending, and the attendance and the interest in this topic was excellent. So clearly people care about this area. It's an important area to think about, both hiring and when you want to get jobs. Oh, okay, I hear another question came in. What about drug testing with the new laws, with the marijuana laws? Do you know anything about that? Or that
Yeah, well, that's I don't know. Not being an HR professional, we have had some experience where, yeah, that's definitely changing. And we had a actual state contractor employee, so not just a private, which I thought would be much more difficult, and with a certified physician's note and some qualifications, like you couldn't smoke while at work, or ingest, I should say. It's not always, you couldn't, be under the influence while at work. And with a doctor's note, it was clear, this gentleman was cleared to work. I don't know enough about what private companies can and can't set as, hey, this is our threshold, and I don't care if you have a doctor's note. I honestly just don't know enough about the legalities of that to comment. But I think as the world moves forward, I certainly would guess in 5 years, it will probably be kind of like saying somebody that drinks alcohol in their free time can't work. I would think it would probably be one of those things that becomes much more the exception than the rule that it's been up until now.
But you can't show up and work drunk either. So I guess
Correct.
it's a matter of how responsible you are with these
Right.
drugs and alcohol. If anybody in the audience, because I know there are a lot of HR professionals, if they know anything about that, any other details, feel free to share it. And even if you share it afterwards, we can disseminate some of this information of links, of specific information in our email that we're going to send to you after this webinar. We'll give you some of those resources and information. If there are no other questions, I'd like to end this great interview. Thank you so much, Donald, for sharing your expertise.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for listening, and thanks for the links to the things that we didn't know.
Sure. And Larry just posted that Jim Randisi, who does drug testing, Larry just actually interviewed him, and there is a link, and I'll share that with everybody, where he talks about the issues around screening and drug testing. So we'll share that with everybody so they have that. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and hope to see you in the next webinar. And again, thank you so much, Donald, for joining us today and offering your expertise.
Thanks for having me. Stay healthy, everybody.
Okay, everybody else, take care.